The end of 2023 is here, and I have to do a 2023 movie ranking. So, in this video, I'm going to be telling you guys my top 10 worst movies of 2023 out of all 66 movies I watched. Now, this is my opinion. You can share your opinion below. We all have different opinions. And if you want to see my full ranking of every movie I watched this year, check out my Letterboxd. First link in the description. I think it's going to be at the top of the description. The link to my Letterboxd, you can look at my list and see my ranking of every single 2023 movie I watched this year. This year was pretty good for movies. There weren't a lot that I drastically hated like last year. Last year, like, my bottom 10 were like actually like terrible in my opinion. But for this year, my bottom 10 were like either like it was bad, but it was like enjoyable in a way, or it's like is trash. So those are like kind of my bottom 10 for this year. It's not like last year's. And also, my New Year's resolution for this year was to make sure that every movie I watched that came out this year, I had to review no matter what. Like, if the movie came out in January and I watched it in December, I had to review it still. That's why some of my videos are 5 minutes long and I was drastically late on the movie. I didn't care if it got views or not. My goal was to review every single movie, and I did that. So, if you wanted to watch my full review for the movies I list below, well, you can do that. But without further ado, let's begin the top 10 worst movies of 2023. Coming in 10th place, which is kind of a hot take, I have Sisu. Now, when it comes to Sisu, I know a lot of you enjoy this movie and find it to be fun. But for me, when I watched this movie, I didn't find any of that at all. I was extremely bored throughout this entire movie. All it is action and not really a lot of character development. I don't see why I need to care about this character as they're fighting Nazis. Like, yes, it is kind of like John Wick, but in like World War II kind of. But I don't really relate to this character. I don't really care about this character, so there's no stakes in everything. I mean, like, yes, the action can be fun at sometimes. The gore is fun. But just overall, I found this movie to be just no character development, just a lot of action, no stakes at all, and just build up to this weird climax that wasn't very satisfying. In 9th place, I have Pet Sematary Bloodlines. Now, when it comes to Pet Sematary Bloodlines, going into this movie, I knew the movie was bad. But since it was Pet Sematary, I still decided to watch it. And watching the movie, it's plain. There's like nothing to it. I mean, like, the ideas in here are fun. I like the idea of bringing a prequel to the Pet Sematary world, but just the way they executed it, it was just boring. You don't care about these characters, and I just felt like the Pet Sematary, where like they already brought the pet back to life, already happened. So then, like, when the movie starts, you don't get to see that choice being decided, and you just cut to that choice already being made. So, takes out that part of Pet Sematary, and then you just see the aftermath of all of that, and it's not very satisfying in any way, and the movie's just pale and plain, and nothing to it. In 8th place, I have Doggone. Now, some of you guys might be like, what in the world is this movie? Well, this movie came out in January on Netflix. It was the second movie I watched this year that came out this year, and when it comes to Doggone, the movie is not terrible, but it's not good, because obviously it's right here on the list. And when it comes to Doggone, it's just a plot we already seen. We've seen this plot before, and there's nothing different to it. Now, this movie is based from a book, which was based from a true story, and that true story took place like way in the past. Well, not way in the past, but took place in the past, that when the movie adapts it, it doesn't really acknowledge the past elements and makes it into a present movie, and it doesn't really flow well with the movie, because this movie doesn't work well as a movie. It works better as a non-fiction event. And just the way this movie was able to execute everything that it did, this movie just doesn't work as a true story type of movie. We've seen the plot before. Just everything, the way they're able to add everything in, it doesn't flow well. The pacing is all over the place. This movie did not work for me. I've only seen it once and it came all the way back in January. My opinion could have changed since then, but from what I remember, this movie was not for me. In 7th place, we have Peter Pan and Wendy. Now, I like the ideas in Peter Pan and Wendy, but to be completely honest, I forgot this movie even came out until I looked at like my list of movies I've watched throughout this entire year, because I've been ranking them like since. Every time I watch them, I put them into my list. And when looking at the list, I saw this movie and I completely forgot I even watched this movie. Now, when I go back to think on it, I remember I liked the ideas in here. That the Peter Pan and Hook relationship, I like that idea in here. But everything else is just takes out the magic from the original Peter Pan movie and just brings in this dull kind of movie that doesn't really work well. There's changes to it to match modern day, which don't work in the context of everything, and just stuff in here don't work. Now, like I said, I do like the idea of Hook and Peter Pan and that storyline. Don't want to spoil it just in case you guys do want to watch this movie, but I like that storyline in here. But just that storyline I think about every time I go back to watch the original movie. But just everything else in this movie does not work. Just like every other live-action Disney movie. In 6th place, we have Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. Now, I know some of you guys do like this movie, but for me, I found the first half of this movie to be boring. It was not interesting at all, and just everything they did not make any sense. The movie's all choppy, hard to follow, just because of all the reshoots it had from the bad test screenings. So, the first half of this movie I found to be completely boring, not interesting at all. Just everything was completely pelled to me. There was jokes in there, like when they get to the jungle. If you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. I like those jokes in there. A lot of you guys think it's extremely stupid, jokes in here, but I enjoyed those jokes in there. But I mainly wasn't interested in this movie until the second half of this movie, where they introduced a new plot line, and that plot line was like the final battle of the movie. That's when I was interested in the movie, but everything else was completely non-interesting, and the part I was interested in, it completely went downhill. I did not care for it for the way it was resolved, and yeah, this movie wasn't for me. I enjoy some comedic bits like the post-credit scene, but I did not enjoy this movie. It was uninteresting, but at least the comedy kind of saved it. The actors kind of saved it, and the relationship between Jason Momoa and his brother saved this movie, but was not for me. In 5th place, we have the most disappointing movie I probably have ever watched, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. Oh my. When this movie came out, like the month before, I avoided social media entirely so I don't get spoiled or know any reviews for this movie. And during that month, if you look back on my channel, you can tell I barely posted during that time because of that reason. And during that time, I just binged every MCU project there was, building up to this movie. And after I watched the movie, I walked out of the theater, and that was probably the most disappointed I have ever been for a movie. Like, my review, like when I made it all the way back in February, when my videos weren't as good, I think I was a little too generous to the movie because I gave it a high score still, but that's just because I didn't want to hate this movie. It was probably my most anticipated movie of the year, and it completely went down after that. It was the biggest disappointment ever. And then, so I made another review, and right here I have a picture of it on screen. I made that review, and just me rewatching the movie, actually giving it my honest thoughts, knowing that it's bad, so my expectations were all the way through the roof. And the movie was worse. The movie was worse than the first time I watched it. And yeah, the only good thing about this movie is Kang in here. I really enjoyed Kang. And the post-credit scenes, like we got Loki Season 2, which we know how that show turned out. And then the post-credit scene with Kang, even though I don't even know if Marvel's still doing that due to Jonathan Majors being fired now. So, yeah, this movie was a huge disappointment. Maybe Future's movies can't fix my opinion on this movie because the way this movie ended as well was so anticlimactic. Like, if I don't want to spoil it, even just in case you want to see it, but it's Marvel, so I figure you already seen this movie. But the way this movie ended was not what, that's not what happened. You don't need that to introduce Kang, and then they introduce someone else in here, and then what they do with that character later on, I was not a fan of because I like that character in the comics. So, yeah, this movie did not do it for me at all. It was boring, dreadful, and a huge disappointment for me. In fourth place, I have Batman: The Doom That Came to Gotham. Now, some of you guys probably never seen these next two movies I'm about to mention, but one day I was bored. I went to the Redbox, saw a Batman movie, so I rented it and watched it, and yeah, this movie was not for me. I know this movie's meant for those people that are really into the comics, like the DC comics. Cause there was just characters that were introduced in this movie. Well, they weren't introduced; they were in the movie already, and I don't even know who those characters were. So those characters were just there. And then when it comes to Batman himself, the horror and mystery aspects of the movie I do like, but just everything else, I feel like the plot of the movie is not interesting enough for me to like it. I like ideas in here because I think this is one of those movies like the Flashpoint animated movie where it's directly connected to the comic. So I think that kind of helped this movie as well, but since I'm not into DC comics that much, I don't really read a lot of comics, I feel like this movie did not work for me, and yeah, this was a disappointing Batman movie. We're now on my final three, but before we continue, make sure you guys like and subscribe, comment down below your thoughts, follow my letterbox called The Codeman Movies, and like I said, if you want to see my ranking of every single movie I watched this year, you can just find my letterbox down below. Third place, we have a long title. It's Justice League X Ruby, I think it's what it is, and Heroes of Hudspin Part 1. You guys probably never heard of this movie as well. This was not based on comics. It's basically a crossover between Justice League and this Ruby franchise, which I have never heard of. And since this movie focused way more on the Ruby characters, I feel like that's why I didn't like this movie. Now, I haven't seen Part 2, but that one looks more interesting because it looks like it focuses more on the Justice League, so tell me if it does, if you guys seen it. But when it comes to Justice League X Ruby, long title, the movie's like an hour and 15 minutes, and it felt like it was a drag to get through. This movie was a huge drag. For only an hour and 15-minute movie, like there's 3-hour movies I watch and they feel like an hour 15 minutes. This hour 15-minute movie felt like 3 hours. It was such a drag. And this, like I said, I do not know who Ruby is. I never even heard of that franchise until I watched this movie. And I mean, like, yes, if you're a fan of DC and the Ruby characters, I guess you'll like this movie. But for me, only got the same reason for Batman: The Doom That Came to Gotham. I went to the Redbox one day, I saw the word Justice League, so I got this movie. Same scenario happened, and I did not like this movie. And ever since then, I don't think I've gone back to the Redbox for a DC movie. But yeah, this movie was not for me. There's no reason for you guys to check this out. Only if you're Ruby and Justice League fans. Yeah, this movie made no sense to me. Focused way too much on the Ruby characters. I mean, like, I guess I like the idea of the Justice League being young, but other than that, this movie you guys probably never heard of. There's no reason why you guys need to watch it. In second place, we have Rebel Moon: The Child of Fire Part 1. Now, yeah, this movie was a big disappointment. Now, when the Rotten Tomato score first debuted, was it a 9%? 9% of people who watched it recommend it. I was shocked. I put a community post up when it was at 17% and saying I have no words for that because of how shocking that was, of how low it was. Because the pitch for this movie is basically Zack Snyder's version of Star Wars. Now, that's interesting. I was excited. The trailers look amazing. This big adventure that should be seen on the big screen in the movie theater, but instead was going straight to Netflix. That's what the trailers promised us. Zack Snyder's version of Star Wars. But then the movie came out. And that's not what it is. And then when you watch interviews, Zack Snyder says the director's cut of this movie is basically a different universe entirely. He says that it's a completely different movie. This movie that we got, Netflix wanted a PG-13 version of. So it's basically the Justice League scenario again. Netflix wanted the Justice League hashtag to release a director's cut, and that's what's happening here. That's why this movie is so bad. Like, the first half of this movie, I liked the build-up, but then the second half, you introduce all these characters, and they don't really do anything in the final act of this movie. They're just there. And just, this movie, it doesn't really need to be a part one. I feel like they could have continued it and really finished off the plot. That version of Zack Snyder's Star Wars that we needed. It's not this movie. Disappointing. It's not what everything promised us. But for the worst movie of 2023, which you could argue came out in 2022, but technically the official release was in 2023. So I'm counting it as a 2023 movie, but you could argue it came out in 2022. But for the worst movie of 2023, we have Skinamarink. Okay, so this movie, if I didn't watch Film Theory's video on this movie, I feel like I would have hated it so much more. But since I watched Film Theory's video before I watched this movie, I feel like that kind of helped my experience a little bit. It kind of pushed it up a little bit for a 4 out of 10 instead of anything lower. But this movie, all you do is look at walls the entire time with noises in the background. That's all this movie is for an hour, whatever how long this movie is. That's all the movie is. And yeah, since I watched Film Theory's video, if you've seen Film Theory, he has like this plot around it, so it kind of helps me understand the movie better. Since I watched that, it helped me understand the plot a little bit better, but yeah, this movie, all you're doing is looking at walls for a full-on hour and 40 minutes or 30 minutes, however how long this movie is, and that's all you're doing. There's nothing else to it. A lot of people say this is the scariest horror movie ever. How in the world do you think that? All you're doing is looking at walls. I mean, like, yes, you could, like, that's kind of what your imagination is to fill in that blank spots. That's kind of what this movie is trying to aim for. But you're looking at walls with noises. And like I said, since I watched Film Theory's video, it helped me understand the plot better, but it didn't really help, obviously, because this is the worst movie of 2023. Just that was my bottom 10 worst movies of 2023. Yeah. Let me know yours down below, and remember, this is just my opinion, and also remember, if you want to see my list of everything I watched this year, is in my Letterboxd in the description below. And yeah, this year, like I said, it was pretty good for movies. I mean, like, yeah, like, the beginning of this year, the summer was packed. We had movie after week after week after week in the summer. Yeah, next year's not as crazy, but I am excited for next year. Next video, well, it depends when I'm posting this, but my plan is to post this first and my top 10 best movies next. So if I did that order, my next video should be top 10 best movies of 2023. So anyways, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys then. Goodbye.